Hey everybody, welcome to Module 4. My name's Janine and with me today is Nick. And today we are going to be going over human milk fortification. And we're going to learn how to calculate and adjust the human milk fortification. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. Okay, so first we have to go over some key points, guys. Before we get into the math portion of it, we definitely want to remember, we all know that breast milk is best, but when we are discussing the actual PN and fortification for premature infants, it's always going to be needed because normally they're not going to be able to get all the essential nutrients that they would normally get if they were a term infant from breast milk. So that's why we use human milk fortification. Secondly, we definitely want to make sure that you pay attention to your units. It's very, very easy to get tripped up here. So we're going to be very careful when we go along and calculating and adjusting and fortifying. It's very easy to get tripped up and it's very easy to get dinged off points in our assignment. So that's one of the major points. I can't stress that enough. And like always, Nick and I always encourage you to go along with us and actually write these out yourself while we're doing it. Feel free to pause the video and rewind and rewatch as much as possible. I'm sure you guys don't want to see our faces a lot, but definitely just make sure that you guys get it down.
Yeah. Before you move on, I just want to make sure I understand. So why wouldn't we fortify breast milk for the term infant if that would result in some, extra nutrients for them?
So Dr. Abel does go over this in our module and in her presentation. When we use the fortification we normally use like formulas like Similac and Enfamil, what we're going to be using today, and that actually does denature the breast milk. So when you have a term infant, it's not necessarily what the mothers and what the actual neonatologists or like the physicians want, because breast milk is always best and breast milk is 100% capable of providing all the essential nutrients for a term infant. But in the case of a premature infant, that's never really seen. So fortification is necessary. Yes, it does still denature the breast milk, but the priority here is to provide the baby with the essential nutrients, because we want to get this baby to grow and make sure that they're growing at the right rate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Okay, so here we have this is almost like a little mini Bible for us to keep, and this is provided by the actual normative data, and it's something that you guys will definitely keep in handy just when using your conversion. So this can actually help you whenever you have, say, a 20 kcal formula. This tells you that it has 0.67 kcals per milliliter. However, let's go ahead and just review this, because we need to make sure, again, that we're paying attention to our units, and when we're going over the kcals per milliliter versus the kcals per ounce, we need to make sure that we're converting and keeping apples to apples and not apples to oranges, because that doesn't make sense, right, Nick?
No, it definitely doesn't. I don't even know what you're talking about.
You never heard that phrase?
That was a joke.
Oh, come on. All right, so let's do some sample calculations. So say we have a formula that's 18 kcals per ounce and we want to convert it to kcals per milliliter. So as it says up here, it's very simple, guys. We're just going to divide by the conversion rate, which is 30 milliliters per 1 ounce. Okay, so we have 18, so we're just going to rewrite this. All right, guys, so we have our 18 kcals per ounce. So I'm just going to switch that and put the kcals and then the ounces over so that you can see this more simply. And we're going to multiply that by 1 ounce over 30 mLs, because we have 1 ounce in 30 ml, sorry, in 1 ounce. So our ounces are going to cancel out here and we're going to be left with our kcals per milliliter. So we're just going to divide 18 by 30. And that leaves us with 0.6. Then we have kcals per milliliter. Okay, so let's try another one. we have 24 kcals per ounce. So again, I'm going to rewrite this. Per ounce, we're going to multiply that by 1 ounce over 30 mLs. Once again, our ounces cancels out. We're going to divide 24 by 30, and that gives us 0.8 kcals per milliliter. All right, simple enough. So remember that 1 ounce equals 30 mLs. 30 mLs equals 1 ounce. When you're converting, that's the conversion factor that you're going to use. When all else fails, I'm going to go back to this, write this down, keep it somewhere safe so that you have it handy. Okay, let's move on. So now we're going to calculate some human milk fortification. So this is the table that Dr. Abel has provided us in our assignment. And just so, let me highlight here, just so that you guys realize the nutrient content of preterm human milk, that sounds kind of confusing, but that is just, it's synonymous with express breast milk, with just breast milk. That's what this means. I know when I read it first, I was like, preterm breast milk, it's just breast milk. And now we're comparing it to the actual fortification. So there's two different types that we can use. We can either use the Similac or we can use the Enfamil. So the Similac is 1 liquid packet, and then the Enfamil is 1 liquid vial. And so basically that's what this is comparing here. So we have the content of the human milk and then what each of these fortifications is applying on top of the breast milk. That's why we call it fortification. Does that make sense?
Simple, yeah. Like a protein powder.
Like protein powder. You're just adding some more essential nutrients. So that's what we're doing. Let's move on. Okay, so we have our first question. Determine the nutrient delivery of express breast milk at 150 milliliters per kilogram per day. Again, remember right here we have express breast milk. This is the same as our preterm human milk that we had in our last chart. So don't let this fool you. Don't let it trick you. All that this is asking is for us to write down exactly the content that's in our preterm human milk, right? In our mom's milk. So if we go back to our chart over here, let me just show you. We're literally just copying this right here. Simple, right? Okay.
Yeah, easy. I can go ahead and tell you if you'd like to write it down in there.
Yeah, for sure. So our calories, what does our breast milk give us? Nick?
So the 150 milliliters per kilogram per day of the breast milk will provide us with 100 calories per kilogram per day.
Okay. And protein?
1.8 grams of protein per kilogram per day.
And our sodium?
Our sodium is in milli equivalents.
Yes.
So it's 1.8 milli equivalents per kilogram per day.
Okay. Then we have our calcium.
That will give us 37 milligrams per kilogram per day.
And next, vitamin D.
Yeah, so we have our vitamin D in units per kilogram per day. So we have 12.
12 for a 1 kilogram baby?
Mm-hmm.
Got it. So she wants us to assess here what would be the amount of vitamin D for a 1.5 kilogram baby, right? So
yeah.
All we are going to do is multiply our units by our baby's weight, and that will give us the amount of vitamin D.
Okay, so then the 12 units per day for the 1.5 kilogram infant will be 12 times 1.5, which will give us 18.
12 units times 1.5 kilogram baby. And that equals 18, right?
Yep.
Oops, that's a 1, guys. And then last we have iron.
Lastly, our iron is at 0.1 milligram per kilogram per day.
Okay, perfect. That was pretty simple, right?
Simple, yeah, yeah.
Super easy. Let's move on. Okay, so next she gives us these charts. It's very, this is again why it's so imperative to pay attention to your units. So here, this is comparing our human milk, which is our express breast milk, preterm human milk, whatever you want to call it, it's the same thing. Compare it to Similac. She wants to know exactly the recipe. So what's going on here, let me do this in red so you guys can see it. All that this chart is saying is that every single line we're adding to actually make the entire recipe, which is the Similac with our breast milk. So for our volume, we have 25 milliliters of our express breast milk, and then our volume in the Similac packet has 5 milliliters. So when we add that up, we get 30 milliliters total. Same thing for our calories. So our calories in our express breast milk, we have 16.75. We're adding it to the 7 calories that's in the Similac packet, and we're getting 23.75. Nick, do you want to tell me why up here we have the 23.7 kcals per ounce, and then how we got this 0.79 kcals per milliliter?
Well, I think you did a great job of explaining it in the previous slide, but the values that we have here in the column are per ounce. So what we want to do is convert that per ounce value to the per milliliters. So all we did was we took the 23.7 kcals in each ounce of formula, and we multiplied that by the conversion factor of 1/30, because there are 30 milliliters in 1 ounce. And this would let us cancel out the ounces and divide the 23.7 by 30, which would give us the 0.79 kcals per milliliter. So
that's exactly where they got that from. That's what our chart is saying. So let's continue here. So again, we have our protein 0.3 plus 0.5 gives us 0.8, and so on and so forth. That's all this is saying, guys. So that we know that this whole entire column right here is our recipe of 25 milliliters of breast milk and 1 packet. Okay? Same thing with our Enfamil. So down here, we have also 30 mLs. Our volume, our calories, our protein, sodium, calcium, vitamin D, and our iron. Okay?
Yeah. So just to be clear, we have here 2 different types of fortifiers.
Two different types of fortifiers. This one up here is our Similac. This one down here is our Enfamil.
Okay. All right.
Got it?
Makes sense. So we're just adding them to the 25 milliliters of human milk.
Of the human breast milk, yes.
Okay.
That is why we call it fortification.
That is, so they say.
That is what they say. Okay, so now we're at our second question. So now we're going to calculate the nutrient delivery for each fortifier using the previous 2 recipes. So right here we have, this one is our Similac. Let me write it here so we don't forget. Okay. So we need to calculate 150 milliliters per kilogram per day. But if we remember that our recipe only makes 30 mLs. So the next question would be, okay, well, how do we get 150 milliliters? So we need to figure out how many recipes are we going to need to get about 150. So the easiest way to do that would be to get 150 milliliters per kilogram per day. And we're going to divide it by our 30 milliliters. And that's still per kilogram per day. Right? And that gives us 5. We're canceling everything out. We just want to see how many of our actual recipes are we going to need to get approximately 150 milliliters if one recipe makes 30 milliliters. So since that gave us 5, that means that we need 5 recipes. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So now what we're going to do is basically multiply our recipe by 5. So in our first column here, for calories, there's 2 different ways to do this, right, Nick? So you can either multiply your calories times 5, which gives us about 119, if I'm not correct.
Mm-hmm.
Or we could also multiply it by our handy dandy conversion factor over here that's already in milliliters, which was the 0.79, right?
Yeah, so we would be multiplying the 0.79 calories per milliliter by the amount of milliliters that we're going to have, which on the left, you have it highlighted there, it's 150. So if we were to do the math that way, then we would write it as 0.79 calories per milliliter.
Mm-hmm.
And like Janine said, we have 150 milliliters. So we're going to multiply that by 150. The milliliters are going to cancel out. And that will give us our 119 kcal. So both ways would give you the same answer.
Correct. So we have 119 kcals. Now we're going to multiply our protein. Let me write our kcals up here as well. So our protein, we have 0.8 grams total in one recipe. We're going to multiply that by 5, which gives us about 4.
Yep, 4 grams of protein.
And then our sodium, we're going to multiply by 5. And that gives us about 2.5 milliequivalents. Same with our calcium.
That would give us about 181.
There we go. Milligrams. Okay, now we're at our vitamin D. Okay, so we have 185 units. If we have a 1 kilogram baby, then we're going to multiply that by 1 kilogram. And of course, we still get 185. However, she's also asking us for a 1.5 kilogram baby, which in that case, you would multiply. I'm just going to do this on the bottom over here. So if we already know, so we have 185 units. That's in 5 total recipes. So if we want to figure out how much of that, how much vitamin D a 1.5 kilogram baby is going to get, we're going to multiply that by our 185 units, which then gives us the 278 units. And then last, we have our iron that we're going to multiply by 5. And that is going to give us about 0.65 milligrams of iron. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, you're just taking note of the amount of nutrients you're getting for the total amount of fluid that's being delivered.
Exactly. Okay, so let's now do this for our Enfamil, right? So we're gonna do the same exact concept, guys. So let's do this, let's calculate our volume by multiplying it with our kcals in milliliters like Nick showed us before.
We're gonna take the 24.2 calories per 1 ounce.
Mm-hmm.
And multiply that by the conversion factor. Remember, there's 30 milliliters in 1 ounce. And in this equation, we want to cancel out the ounces. So we're going to put that ounce on top, 30 milliliters in 1 ounce. This will cancel out. And then the 24.2 divided by 30 will give us the 0.81 calories per milliliter for this formula.
Nice. So now that we know that we have our 0.81 kcals per milliliter, we can multiply this times our 150 milliliters that we need, and that is going to give us about 121 kcals per kilogram per day. Or we can also multiply by 5 recipes, which will also give us our 121 kcals. Okay, and then our same thing with our protein. We're going to multiply it times 5, which is going to give us about 4.3 grams of protein. Our sodium is going to give us about 3 milliequivalents. Our calcium we multiply by 5, and that's going to give us about 176 milligrams per kilogram per day. And then here we go with our vitamin D, 49 times 5, which is going to give us about 245 units. And then if we need it for a 1 kilogram baby, we're going to multiply that times 1 kilogram, which will still give us 245 units. However, if we want to find out the amount of vitamin D in a 1.5 kilogram baby, we're going to multiply our 245 units. We can do it down here in the bottom right corner. 245 units times our 1.5 kilogram baby. And that is going to give us about 368 units of vitamin D. And then lastly, we have our iron. We're going to multiply it times 5, and that's going to give us about 2.3 milligrams per kilogram per day. Okay, guys, so next we're going to do a comparison. Let's compare across the board between our express breast milk, Similac, and Enfamil. So first, what nutrients are not being met with our express breast milk? So we've copied and pasted our express breast milk column that we had done previously on one of the previous slides. So here, with just our breast milk, guys, our calories, this is our advisable intake. Our advisable intake is about 120 kcals per kilogram a day. And with our express breast milk alone, we're getting 100. Met or not being met? Pretty obvious, right? So definitely our calories for our express breast milk is not being met. Next, we have our protein. With express breast milk, we have 1.8 grams per kilogram per day, and our advisable intake is about 4 grams per kilogram per day. So that's obviously not being met as well. Let's highlight that one. Our sodium advisable intake is about 3 milliequivalents, and in express breast milk, it's only 1.8. So that's not being met. Our calcium advisable intake is 180 milligrams per kilogram per day. And with our breast milk, we have 37 milligrams per kilogram per day. Definitely lacking there. Definitely. Vitamin D, we need greater than or equal to 400 international units per day. Breast milk provides 12 units for a 1 kilogram baby and about 18 units for a 1.5 kilogram baby. Also, definitely lacking. And iron, a baby should get about 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram a day. And with express breast milk, they're getting about 0.1 milligrams per kilogram a day. So this brings us back to the point that I made in the beginning in our key points. Express breast milk alone for premature infants is just inadequate. And that's why we still give it to them, because there's a whole bunch of other benefits to giving the breast milk to a premature infant. But at the same time, that's why we use this fortification to fortify the breast milk when giving it to these babies, these premature babies, so that they can they can maximize their metabolism with the actual essential nutrients that they need. So for this question, everything. The express breast milk, everything's inadequate. So we're going to put down calories, protein, sodium, calcium, vitamin D, and iron. Next, what nutrients are not being met with the 24 kcal per ounce fortified breast milk options? So now we're going to be comparing our Similac and our Enfamil. So let's compare. So our Similac, we have our advisable intake again is about 120 calories. And with the Similac, we have 119 calories per kilogram per day. That's pretty on point, right? I think we're okay.
Yeah.
Are we on that same consensus?
That works.
And then same with Enfamil, it's at 121 kcal. So it's just above, but not crazy. I think that's good. So I think in the calories, we're good to go. So our protein, our advisable intake is about 4 grams per kilogram per day. With our Similac, we have 4 grams per kilogram per day. And with our Enfamil, we have 4.3 grams per kilogram per day. So in protein, we're good to go. That's fine. Next, we have our sodium, which the advisable intake is about 3 milliequivalents. With Similac, we have 2.5. So that is a little lacking. That's under. It's not being met. But for our Enfamil, we do have 3 milliequivalents per kilogram per day. So Enfamil, we're good with sodium, but Similac, we're not. Those needs are not being met. With calcium, our advisable intake is 180 milligrams per kilogram per day, approximately. With Similac, we're getting 181 milligrams, while with Enfamil, we're getting 176. So this is kind of reversed. Similac is meeting the guidelines. However, Enfamil is lacking in calcium. So the calcium needs for Enfamil is not being met. Then our vitamin D should be greater than or equal to 400 IUs. So we have 185 for our 1 kilogram baby and 278 for a 1.5 kilogram baby, which obviously I think it's safe to say both of those are still lacking, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And our Enfamil, we have 245 IUs for a 1 kilogram baby and 360 IUs for 1.5. So that is also still lacking. We're still not being met. It is close, especially for the 1.5 kilogram baby, about 368, but doesn't mean close does not cut it, right?
Not in this case.
Okay. So definitely our vitamin D. And then our iron, the baby should be getting about 2 to 3 milligrams per kilogram per day. Similac is giving 0.65 milligrams per kilogram per day, and Enfamil is 2.3. So again, our Similac is definitely inadequate, but Enfamil is pretty okay. I think it's right there in the middle range.
Right.
Right? Okay. So I think that was a good comparison. And so now, what additional supplements would you recommend? Well, obviously, we know the actual supplements that are not being met, right? So if the baby's on Similac, we would consider giving them a sodium supplement. I know that in Dr. Abel's modules and in her presentation, although, it's kind of funny, Nick, because I think we're all, as dietitians, we always learn like, oh, sodium's so bad. But in the case of the premature infant, sodium is actually very, very necessary. Remember that, all our electrolytes, especially sodium and calcium and phosphorus, are all in the makings of providing homeostasis for our body and equilibrium, in regards to our intracellular and extracellular components. And so those type of nutrients are definitely essential. And if they're not being met, especially in a premature infant, it could be very critical. So definitely recommend for the Similac, the sodium, and obviously a vitamin D and an iron supplement. And then with our Enfamil, definitely we know our vitamin D. However, if you refer to Dr. Abel's presentation again, with calcium, it can be a little tricky, and she does recommend to just keep keep monitoring the labs. And if the labs are saying that the premature baby is low in calcium, then it would warrant a supplement for that premature infant. All right, guys, I think that about covers it.
Yeah, I think we've hit it all. This is a very important PowerPoint for that we don't really think about as breast milk fortification for the preterm infant.
Yeah.
So I know I've definitely learned a lot, and I hope you all have too.
I wish you the best of luck on your assignments. And if you need help, if you need extra help, make sure to contact Dr. Abel, try and make a Zoom meeting with her. She'll be more than happy to go into further detail about this with you guys. And we hope to see you again next time.
Yeah. Nick and Janine signing off. You guys have a great week. See you next time.